Yo, this is Ruben Harris. I'm here with the homies Art and Timur Meister, and this is the Breaking Starters podcast. Timur, can you please tell the people what we're doing today?
Yeah, so today we're sitting just north of Market in San Francisco, and like we always say, our guests don't come to us, we come to them. So we broke into another startup called Torch, and Ruben is about to introduce the guest.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to give a shout out to Gary Tan, not only because this is one of the waviest interviews that we've ever done, but also because we're interviewing Cameron Yarbrough, who is the CEO of Torch. He's one of the best executive coaches in the world. And not only are we going to talk about coaching and mentorship for executives, but we're going to talk about coaching in general for everyone. And we're going to go into how he created this company and talk about all kinds of other different things. But first, I just want to say welcome, Cameron.
Thanks, fellas. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you as well. Why don't we just start off by talking about coaching in general and the problem that you're solving and why it's relevant for not just executives but anyone thinking about a career.
I got into coaching because I'm incredibly interested in the intersection between psychology and business, and so this is an industry that really encompasses my two biggest professional passions. And I would say about the executive coaching industry in general is that it kind of started out as something, it sort of originally evolved out of sports back, 20, 30 years ago when people saw that, professional athletes were having these individualized coaches that were helping them succeed. I think what happened was high profile professionals started to kind of see this happening, and they wanted to have a coach for themselves. The people who were a natural fit for this role had backgrounds in psychology, which is where some of the stigma I think originally with coaching came from is that it carried with it some of that stigma that therapy carried with it. So people were kind of clandestine about it. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want people to know they were working with their own, executive coach, right? So, but eventually what happened is people came out of the closet about the fact that they were working with coaches, and these were very high profile people, and they were incredibly successful people. So over the course of the last couple of decades, coaching has turned into this sort of elite service that very, very highly successful people get to benefit from.
Got it. So that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, speaking about athletes, you would argue that like if it wasn't for Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors, they wouldn't have won so many games. And these coaches tend to be only for people that are elite. But what problem are you solving related to making this more accessible for people?
Yeah, so originally these individuals who branded themselves as executive coaches would charge, and they still do charge thousands of dollars an hour for their service. So if you want to work with any of the highest profile coaches in the country, you're going to pay anywhere from $500 an hour to $5,000 an hour.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating. So obviously those prices aren't available at those rates. Coaching isn't available to people who are farther down the quote unquote power stack within the organization, right?
Yeah.
So this was the problem that I saw. I would walk into organizations, I would be coaching the CEO, but I would see mid-level managers, I would see individual contributors who could also benefit from coaching, but I couldn't access them and they couldn't access me. So I set out to try and solve this problem in order to democratize the service.
Got it.
Yeah, and when it comes to coaching, I think everyone has an idea of like what a athlete's coach does. What does a coach of a CEO, like what kind of advice, what kind of problems does a CEO have that they might need like someone like a coach to come in and advise them on?
So a lot of people think that coaching is really about, finding a mentor, someone who's going to give you tactical advice about the problem you need to solve next. But generally, leaders who are hiring coaches aren't using a coach for tactical advice. They'll use their board members for that, or they have specific tactical advisors who are giving them counsel on how to solve the next strategic problem. What an executive coach is actually doing is helping them manage their own psychology and their own emotions. If as many startup founders will tell you, they're they're consumed by this constant undying feeling of dread on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, we could relate to that.
Yeah, been there.
And people oftentimes will come to coaching because, they'll have a couple of ideas about why they want to, problems they want to solve and what they'll sort of how they'll lean on their coach. But really what's motivating them is this feeling of dread that comes with this incredible challenge of creating a startup.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's a when it comes to supporting someone emotionally, sounds very manual. And I know, like, historically people have said, like, well, coaching and mentorship isn't scalable. And I know that you have some kind of software play to this. How are you thinking about addressing this problem from a technology perspective? And I know you mentioned some things about tracking. Like, what does your software do for people?
So it's true that coaching as an industry has been a very, very fragmented market, right? And so this is one of those problems that we want to solve by creating this global marketplace of executive coaches, all of who have graduate degrees and domain experience, and that we sort of pre-select as they kind of come through our selection process, and we filter out the best ones, right, and import them onto our platform. So that's part of the issue, is that we have to do the vetting to find the best people. The other problem we're trying to solve is that historically coaching has not seen much innovation in terms of software and analytics. So this was a problem I always saw as a coach myself, is that there was very little available in terms of how to track the outcomes that come from coaching, right? Yeah. So the industry has seen what's called a 360 review, and that's been an important, that's been a product that's been available in the coaching industry for quite some time, but that's kind of been it. It's really a robust survey.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is building a software platform that encompasses a 360 review, but it also encompasses what's similar to an OKR platform, which is, once we get the results of the assessment back, the software then populates a set of goals for that person to work on. The coach has visibility into those goals. The employee has visibility into those goals, and then we measure that progress over time. And then lastly, it's very important for the HR department to have some sort of a gauge into whether the coach is making progress with that employee.
Got
right?
it.
Because you're asking them to foot the bill. So so we have a dashboard that allows the HR department to log in and see how their employees are doing over time.
Yeah. And what are some of the examples of the progress, quote unquote, or OKRs that people could set for themselves?
So if it comes out, as a result of my 360 review, it turns out that I need to work on executive presence, I may be assigned to go watching some TED Talks or reading a book or enrolling in Toastmasters so that I work on my public speaking, et cetera. So they're typically things that are soft skills based, but translate into more powerful leadership.
So then would your platform track them taking the class, and would show you at a quarterly review, hey, this person did XYZ to hit his goal?
Yeah, it still requires that the employee self-reports that they actually did take the class and that they did actually watch the TED Talk. But we pulse survey a couple of allies right around that person to gauge whether or not they're actually improving, right? So if we're working with an employee, we will pulse survey the manager, a colleague, maybe a direct report, and say, hey, is Joe actually improving at executive presence?
Interesting. So they get a feedback loop from them, and then that's also fed to an HR department so they can see visibility into how that person is doing on their task.
Right. Basically, our whole methodology is built on productizing feedback.
Got it.
So it sounds like setting the OKRs, and maybe I'll ask you kind of two questions. One is, what is an OKR? The other one is, how can someone who's looking to break into tech apply the approaches to their own kind of journey and tackling learning new skills?
So an OKR stands for Objective and Key Results. It was popularized by Google a few decades ago, and it is just sort of a tool for driving results. Right? So the objective is typically a stretch goal, and the KRs are these drivers. Right?
Got it.
And then we adopted that framework so that for leadership-based soft skills. And that's what our learning goals tool is. It's an OKR based tool for driving leadership, soft skills that move leadership.
Got it.
Got it.
And so,
yeah, and the second question was around like our listeners, majority of them are learning a new skill as we speak. And a lot of them want to get jobs in tech like engineering, design, which require them to put in hours of work into it. So how can they apply just the concepts and things that you teach or your tool teaches the clients to their own kind of daily struggles?
That's a great question. I mean, the first thing that I would recommend to people is reading. Mm-hmm. When I wanted to get in, I started just reading a tremendous amount. I read books, I read articles, I read books. Mm-hmm. So I just did a tremendous amount of research to help me get here, to help me kind of break in, if you will. Yeah. Other methodologies that I would apply, I would say, work on yourself. Work on your relationships. Mm-hmm. And I did that through meditation. I did that through lots of my own personal therapy. I did that through my own journaling and my own writing. So these are the ways that I cultivated a greater sense of self-awareness so that I could get into the position where once I am in leadership, that I would be able to more likely to succeed.
And it sounds like the advice you're giving, it's about looking inwards, because a lot of people think, how can I go outwards and like go to meetups or look at different courses? Your advice sounds like they should look at themselves and maybe ask themselves what's their learning style, and like what are some things they're doing well, what can they do better, and things like that. Would you advise to have like an accountability group, or have your peers provide feedback around things that you're trying to do and how you're doing with that?
Right. So what I said earlier that what we're doing at Torch is productizing feedback. Mm-hmm. So when you're not working in an organization, you have to simulate that on your own, right? Yeah. So you could do that through your own peer network. You could do that through getting into your own group therapy if you want to. That's another option. Mm-hmm. But I would start with that. I would start with research, reading and learning and looking inward through meditation, through therapy. Mm-hmm. Through any kind of through your spirituality, through any kind of contemplation that helps you learn more about yourself. Yeah. That will set you up for success once you are put into the hotbed that is startup.
Yeah. And we think of CEOs, kind of unrelated note, we think of CEOs as like these well put together people who are composed, confident. They can explain like the company's vision. They're speaking with investors. They have everything going for them. But in your experience, since you kind of get to see the behind the curtain look, what are some of the common struggles like these people in high positions of power experience, and what are some of their self-doubts?
It's a great question. I think that CEOs typically are trained to be very, very polished when they're in front of the camera or when they're speaking at all hands. But a lot of times internally, they're just working just as hard as anybody to manage the incredible stress, incredible anxiety, and incredible insecurity and constant feelings of vulnerability. They're just very, very well trained at how to present. So I would say that, it's very, very typical of startup founders. First of all, I will tell you anecdotally speaking, from all the different people that I've worked with, a lot of startup CEOs actually come from a lot of turbulence in their families of origin. There's a lot of trauma actually in the family of origins of people who end up in startup leadership. And what's interesting about that is that because they came from family of origins that had a lot of trauma, they are uniquely positioned to be able to handle the incredible amount of stress and anxiety and turbulence that they have to face in startup. The number one painful, difficult thing that a startup founder has to deal with is uncertainty. The anxiety that comes with uncertainty. And when you grow up in a family system with lots of trauma, that child is constantly dealing with the uncertainty around danger and figuring out how to get themselves out of that danger.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And is there any other like common themes that you've seen amongst the CEOs that they face?
I would say, and maybe this is just Silicon Valley in particular, but they are incredibly progressive they'll do anything that it takes to be successful, even if that requires owning their own vulnerability and being very progressive about how they treat that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you see a lot of most startup CEOs that you are actually in therapy in addition to having a coach.
Interesting.
Yeah, wow.
Interesting.
And a quick question on that topic. What do you see, like, kind of as these founders raise more money, like what type of challenges are they starting to face? Because a lot of the time we think that, oh, they just raised like $500 million, they must be happy. But like, what are some new challenges that come with having more money that you're responsible for?
It seems like from the outside that person is going to be more and more stressed out as the company scales, but it's not necessarily true. What happened, they're just incredibly stressed out all the time from the very beginning until it's over, and even when it's over, they're stressed because now they have this sense of this feeling of abandonment and loss around their identity and who they were.
Yeah.
It's just stressful all the time. The challenges just change, but once you're trying to raise a Series C, for example, you're trying to raise a $50 million round, you've learned a lot getting to that point. So you're able to your psyche's able to handle that challenge because you've learned so much to get to that point where you're raising a Series C. But it's just as stressful for that. So it's just as stressful for that person raising a Series C as it was for raising the original angel round.
Yeah, and I know we only have 10 minutes left, but the work that you're doing is incredibly important, very difficult to do. First, how many managers exist to be able to create this marketplace that you're talking about, or executive coaches exist to create this executive marketplace? How big is the market? How did you address creating your MVP or your minimum viable product, so to speak, without technology? Because I know you faced some issues hiring software engineers and things like that. So can you kind of talk about how you address that and how you convince investors to invest in something that they typically don't invest in?
We think this is about a $15 billion untapped market, and roughly the way that we get to that market size is if there's 3 million managers throughout the U.S. that are actually within the addressable market, that filters out a lot of retail managers, et cetera. But 3 million professional managers at $500 a person, that's a $15 billion market, right? So what was the second part of your
question? So that's the size of the market. So you know how big it is. You're able to paint that picture to investors, but you didn't have engineers in the beginning, or you had very few technical resources. So you approach things manually, and some people call that doing things that don't scale. So how did you start creating these matches and these allies to demonstrate to investors that this is going to work before you started building tech? And how did you convince investors to put dollars behind it after that?
So our MVP, our minimum viable product, was literally just a matchmaking service between coaches and employees, right? And we just did that via email, and then we would turn them loose on Zoom, and we would send out a monthly invoice. It was really that simple. Like anybody can do it, right? But we did that enough. And we built up enough recurring revenue that was and we had very low churn, meaning the people that we were matching with coaches were sticking. And so with that story, we were able to go to investors and say, hey, investors, this is, we have real product market fit when it comes to actual coaching.
Yeah.
We think that there is an incredible amount of software that we can build around this service of executive coaching that will make the coaches better, that will allow us to recruit more coaches from all over the world, that will create defensibility and a genuine moat from our competitors. So invest in us so that we can build software, products, and analytics tools around the coaching experience that will allow us to scale.
Yeah,
awesome.
And it's incredible how you can think about these like systemic building blocks, because now you're taking something that you've been doing and thinking of it as a product, and now you're able to solve these problems so your customers can get the questions answered in a very seamless way. Your story is unique because you're also founder of a company, and you're founder of a company that's providing this advice. So for yourself, what are your daily routines? Like, how do you manage your own psychology and your own relationship with your employees kind of on a daily basis?
It's a great question. So it's a huge focus of mine. And what I would say, a couple of the hacks that I use, I work with a therapist. I've been working with the same therapist for about 5 years. So I meet with her over phone every single week. And so she's sort of like my go-to therapist slash coach. So that's probably the number one thing that I use. I also exercise every single about 5 days a week, and exercise is proven to be as successful at managing anxiety and depression as antidepressants, at least in like moderate to medium level grades of anxiety and depression. Exercise is just as powerful as antidepressants.
Yeah.
So I do regular exercise. I swim. I ride my bike. I walk. I hike a lot. I have 2 kids, so I have to combine a lot of my exercise with my children. So I put a 30-pound toddler on my back, and I'll go like climb a mountain.
Yeah, I love it. And I know you got 5 minutes left before your last interview, so I'll bake these last questions into kind of like our lightning round that we normally do. That Timur usually talks about around where we share tactical advice. But you mentioned HR people. Having a view into what the executive coaches are doing. Is that who you sell to? What's usually the process when it comes to reaching out to them? And then we'll go into like the personal like lightning round stuff. Yeah,
we're B2B only. So we're primarily selling to, in smaller startups, we'll sell directly to the CEO because the CEO is the HR department until the company gets to be around 60 to 100 people. And you'll see a head of people. And at that point, we're selling to the head of people. So for small businesses, we're oftentimes selling to the CEO.
Got it.
Once a company kind of gets into growth stage, we'll be selling to a head of HR. Once they're mid-market, over 1,000 employees, they'll typically have a head of learning and development, and that's who we'll be selling to.
Got it. And is the vision for it to go from executive to eventually go down market, so make it more accessible for mid-level and individual contributors?
That's really and it's actually true to who we are and what our real genuine mission is we want to make executive coaching available down market, if you will, within the organization. So, inevitably we have executives coming onto the platform because we don't exclude them, but really the focus of our whole platform and our methodology and our marketing, et cetera, is really focused on managers.
Got it. So, cool. So part of the reason why, so I guess we'll go into lightning round now. I called it the most waviest interview ever is because you're a surfer and the places that you've chosen to live is because you love to surf. So can you talk a little bit more about why surfing means so much to you?
Surfing was actually growing up, it was something that I could do on my own, and I could it's very meditative when you're sitting out there in the water and you're by yourself. It was great for just alone time and managing my own anxiety. It's also incredibly scary and challenging when the surf gets big. When you crash on like a 12 to 15 foot wave, you get held under the water.
Wow.
And up here the water's cold and it's turbulent. You have to be able to let go when you're under the water being tumbled by a wave. Because if you panic, you can drown.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to learn how to, when you're down there held down, you don't know which way is up.
Yeah.
You just have to let go.
Interesting.
You just have to relax.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect metaphor for being in a startup.
Yeah.
Or anything in life, or most things in life.
Trust your struggle. There's some things you control, some things you can't. Sometimes you just got to just chill.
And interestingly, if you are able to just relax and let go and not worry about which direction is up, the natural buoyancy of your body just floats you up to the top of the ocean.
Fire.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to tweet that one around.
Yeah.
All right.
When it comes, let's do one more question. So when it comes to kind of advice you have for people who are looking to break into tech, let's take the 20-year-old who's graduating from college. You haven't gone through this journey. What would you want them to know now that you've done it, like you're a CEO of a company?
I would say it's like play your game. I was a therapist right? I mean, I'd run, small businesses before, but really I was a therapist when I wanted to break into tech. And so I didn't go out and try to get a degree to become a software engineer because that's not who I am.
So stay true to yourself.
Know who you are. Play your game.
Know who you are and play your game. So what I did was I broke into tech by doubling down on the industry of psychology and the business background that I had, and just accessing it through that portal. There's a portal just about everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You just need to find that portal for yourself, and that has to be true to who you are.
Yeah, and then you align with people who can build a tech, right?
Yep.
So kind of know yourself, know your competency, and just double down and go for it.
Yep.
Go through your portal.
Love
All right,
it.
man. So what's the best way to stay in touch with you?
The best way to stay in touch with us, first of all, is to read our blog at torch.io, to follow us on Twitter at Torch Labs, and email info@torch.io.
Awesome.
So without further ado, let's break in. Thank you.